So Brandon, thank you very much for making time to share your insights into the future of leadership. But before we walk into the future, Brandon, can you please tell us, where did you grow up?
So I grew up in a small town of Boksburg, also on the east rand of Joburg. Yeah, born and bred, spent 25, 26, 27 odd years in Boksburg. Yeah.
And Brandon, what was your dream career when you grew up?
When I grew up, I wanted to be a combat helicopter pilot. I wanted to fly the Longbow Apache for the US Marines. That was my dream job when I was growing up.
And tell us, who inspired you in your early days?
It's a good question. A number of people. I think the number one person who inspired me the most was my dad. He was a sort of rags to riches story, but yeah, he was my number one inspiration growing up. You know, that was my key thing. He was yeah, quite a legendary man in my own eyes. That's why I guess, you know, very inspiring.
Now, Brandon, you have got a very interesting, impressive career history. You worked at the likes of Goodyear, Bridgestone, and today you're the sales and marketing director at BTS. Now, looking back over your career, would you say there was a turning point, or maybe a number of turning points?
I would say a number of turning points. Yeah, there's been quite a few where there's just been the opportunity to either maintain course or step up, and yeah, those resulted in completely different paths in my career. So I would say a number of turning points. Yeah.
And you have a lot to say. You write about leadership. How important has leadership been in your career?
Well, I think it's important for anyone in any career. A good leader can make or break you. And I think from my perspective, I think leadership is extremely important, and it has been in my career, not only for the leaders that have taken me on my journey, many of which I'm still in constant contact with, but also the way that I've led other people is also been pretty critical. I've learned some very valuable lessons around what to do and what not to do. And that's kind of helped frame my own personal leadership philosophy over the years that I've been, let's just say, living various lives in the different organizations I've been in.
Right. And Brandon, what would you say is driving you today?
It's a really good question. You know, I think being a father is probably my number one driving purpose right now. I think just making sure that one day my son can look up and say, "Hey, you inspired me, Dad," and you really, I was proud to be your son. I think that's the one thing. I think there's a second part that's driving me, and that's always been almost a life purpose of mine. I remember back to when I started lecturing many years ago. I was asked by one of the heads of one of the academic heads of one of the institutions I was lecturing. He said, "Why you're so young? Why are you lecturing?" And I said, "Well, I have this sort of innate drive to fundamentally change the way that leadership and management is done today, because I believe that we are where we are because of the things that we've done, and the only way to change that is by changing the future mindset of leaders and of managers, and just so those are the two things. I think, you know, my son and just my sort of drive to want to change the landscape of leadership and management in many different facets.
Right. And Brandon, looking into the future, and I know it's a big question, but what does the future of leadership mean to you?
The future of leadership mean to me, and it is a big question. And I actually, you know, I've been on quite a journey myself over the last couple of months, where I've realized that I've spent a lot of time just being bogged down by pure action, you know, acting out, getting things done, ticking the list, getting to targets, doing this, growing business units. It's just been a constant go, 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 go. And I made a commitment to myself probably about 6 or 7 months ago that I need to get more grounded, feel more connected in the way that I approach business and life. So I've been on quite an extensive journey to try and just feel that next level of connection with myself and with everyone around me. So when you ask the question, what does the future of leadership look like for me? My number one leadership philosophy is that your main role as a leader is to make yourself completely and utterly redundant, right? And I think the future of leadership is something along the lines of two things. One, a sort of a network of individuals that are constantly striving to make themselves redundant, whilst at the same time empowering and energizing the people beneath them and around them to fulfill that role, so that they can, as the leaders, they can step onto bigger and brighter things. So I think just to nutshell it, it's the future of leadership for me is a team of or individuals that are constantly striving for the next level. And that next level is not necessarily a jump up in the corporate ladder. It's not necessarily a jump up in a new business, their own business, a lateral move. It's a lot more than that. There's a level of connectedness, almost an energy connection, if you will, away from this constant wanting to deliver. Yes, delivering results is critical, but this whole idea of doing it in a way that you feel more connected to the people around you, feel more connected to your purpose ultimately. I think that for me is something that the future of leadership would look like.
Now, Brendan, that reminds me of your LinkedIn article on leadership lessons from horses. Can you maybe recap and elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, sure thing. Just a quick thing around that article. I sort of every 6 months I sort of book about 2 weeks off, and in those 2 weeks I spend time, again, not on vacation, just spending time with our horses. We've got 5 horses, all of which are rescues. My wife is a horse lover, has been since she was 3 years old. I became a horse lover when I met her 9 years ago now. And in essence, a couple of key things, right? Horses are amazing animals. They are extremely intuitive. They are just beautiful creatures. But I've learned a lot of things from them that I'm sort of drawing connections to the business world and to leadership. And just two key things that sort of the article alludes to. One is the whole idea of creating a cadence, creating habits with the horses, so that these almost rituals, if you will. And by doing, by having these rituals in place with the horses, I have an immediate sort of health check with them. I can walk outside, and if I notice something out of the ordinary, I know that there's a cause for concern. I can go in, I can address the issue. And I liken this in the article to 2 key things, one around leadership and the second around dealing with clients in sales environment. So in the leadership lens, it's about looking at your own cadence of meetings, your own cadence, your procedures, everything with your team, and then just saying, does this give me a glimpse as to the team's performance, and can I diagnose performance real quick in that space? Same thing with your clients. What's your cadence with your clients? Is there a way that you can do a quick health check with your clients just by looking at the cadence? And the second component is just around creating the environment. When you look at horses, horses tend to thrive in environments that are conducive to them being, firstly, feeling extremely safe, secondly, being healthy, and third, limiting the amount of threats that are in their space. And what I found with the environment that we've created over the years with them is that it's welcomed other I was to say livestock, but it's not, sort of other creatures into the ecosystem, the broader ecosystem. And we're seeing new species every year coming in, whether it's birds or insects or, rodents, or even predators and snakes and owls and sort of birds of prey. And what I just asked the question again, linking that to leadership and sales, was, go and analyze the environment that you create. And in the article, I sort of prompt you with a couple of guidelines, a couple of questions around analyzing your environment. And does it create that sort of that environment where people want to come and join you? And equally the same with your clients. Give you just a couple of tips, a couple of questions to ask yourself around, is this actually helping my clients? Do clients want to come to me, or do I have to constantly go and look to them? So I draw a couple of analogies from the horse world, if you will, into leadership and into sales. And I have a couple of more that are coming. Some is about managing sort of multiple generations in a team, and how, if you look to the horse world, how they sort of partner up in their herd, and how you can learn from that in terms of managing different and leading different generations. So yeah, I'm blessed to have the opportunity to sort of observe this and be able to live it.
And Brendan, what have you learned from your own leadership journey that you consider most important for building future leaders?
So I think that the number one lesson for me is that you've got to believe that the people you're leading are already living at their full potential before they even do. Because if you're doing that, you're giving them a glimpse of how other people could potentially see them. They may not be living at their full potential, but if you believe that they can and that they will, and you say to them, I believe you've got this, I believe you can deliver, it shines a different light on how they start perceiving themselves. So for me, I think that's the number one lesson. If you can build that belief in their mind through just, and I'm not saying, no, I'm going to say it like it is, just paint that belief for them, show them what they could be. I think that for me has been my number one lesson, is just make sure that people can see the potential that you see in them.
And Brendan, when you speak to aspiring leaders and maybe your team members, what do you tell them about social media? How should they navigate social media?
So I think there's a couple of key tips, and I don't think I can take ownership of these particular points, and I would not be able to reference the author, but I was referred over to an author very early on in my career by one of our mentors, all around the tips, and I'm a big fan of LinkedIn in particular, and through this sort of referring to the book and then getting referred to a couple of other key sort of influences in South Africa at the time, and I'm going back to like 2012. I guess the number one thing that I want to highlight for future leaders is, number one, start building your network early on. Don't build your network of leaders, of influencers, of the community you're building. Don't build it with the intent of using that community now. Build it from the outset so that you can, at a future point, when you do need someone in that community, you can call on them. Don't go and call on someone straight away to try and sort of pull, whatever it is out of that individual, whether it's a referral, whether it's an introduction. So just build your network for the sake of building the network and connecting with people. I think that would, for me, would be the number one piece. I think there's another piece that I'd just like to add, because I think a lot of people are not necessarily aware of this, but there's this growing trend in social media monitoring around recruitment, around placement, around, it's even going so far in certain parts of the world into your financial scoring as well, and just to be mindful of what you put out there, because once it's out there, it's out there.
These are challenging times. And what is your advice for future leaders in terms of challenges? What are some of the biggest challenges they should expect to encounter in their career?
Good question. I think those challenges are fundamentally changing. The challenges that sort of I saw growing up, or the challenges that I created growing up, are changing all the time. So I think that there's a couple of key things that I see as challenges going forward. I think the one is this sort of this new belief in firstly hybrid work. So how do I manage the team remotely? I think that, or lead a team, a remote team, I think is one of them. I think some of the other things that are going to be significant challenges for leaders going forward is just people's different perception around life. I think hybrid work is something that's going to be a challenge, but I think the second component, or one of the other challenges, not just the second one, is this whole awareness of how the sort of generations are starting to shift away from this need of, I need a paycheck, I need to, climb the corporate ladder, to this whole idea of, I need to feel connected, I need to be driven by purpose, I need to align to an organization that is sort of environmentally friendly, socially responsible, and so on and so forth. So I think at sort of a broader level, that's going to be one of the biggest challenges as a leader, is being able to navigate individuals that step into that space, because you as a leader may not necessarily have lived that experience. So you won't necessarily be able to relate to what it is that they're going through. I think, the other challenges that I'm seeing is this removal of global boundaries with the virtual world that we live in. I look at myself, I'm working across a number of different continents. And I think that's something that's quite interesting and will continue to be a challenge, is you'll be working with people from different parts of the world, although you may be based in South Africa, but you'll be managing these global teams. And you may never see those people physically. That's, I think, the other challenge. So I think those three key things are quite pertinent as time progresses.
And Brendan, if you were to design a curriculum for future leaders, what are some of the new skills you would want to factor in?
So I think one of the biggest skills gaps that I see in future leaders is just critical thinking. And I know this is probably sort of something that's thrown out there quite often, but the challenge is that I'm not seeing enough people provoking the status quo, challenging it and saying, this isn't necessarily what I believe to be true. I want to test the hypothesis. I think critical thinking is one of them. I think the second thing is just, and I'm not quite sure if this would even be part or even possible from a curriculum perspective, but how do I sort of, I guess it is actually possible if you look at the Arbinger Institute, sort of that whole idea of breaking out of box thinking, right? So thinking, not necessarily thinking outside of the box in the innovation context, but not placing people in boxes, right? And not being confounded by stereotypes, not walking into a room and sort of having these preconceived ideas about people. So that whole idea of just looking at the world with a completely open lens and not having preconceived ideas. And I think the third one, which I think is quite critical, is empathy, but empathy with a bit of a diplomacy lens, right? So being able to relate to people, but being able to do so in a very diplomatic way. So that I can, not only when I'm engaging and understanding people, but I can speak to them and meet them where they're at in a way that's not going to, upset the apple cart, as it were. So I think those three key things would be there. I could go on to mention a couple of key things. I think the biggest challenge, if I get really tactical, would be things like just understanding basic business acumen, right? Understand how a business functions before you start managing or leading that business. Don't just step in and have that, hey, I know people, so I'm going to run this business. So I think those four key things for me would be top of mind.
Now, Brendan, as a mentor to future leaders, can you maybe share a success story or two where you mentored an upcoming leader and that person took your advice to heart?
Yeah, I've got two stories. I know, we I don't think we'll have time for two. I'm going to start with the one, and it was in a previous life where I worked for one of the Thai manufacturers that you mentioned earlier, and I actually he reported directly into me. And at the time, he was a shop floor trainer. And he sat down, and I sort of, my typical leadership approach when I get a new team or when I adopt a team, I step in and sort of clean the slate and have an open conversation. And when we started the conversation, I said to him, "What's your ambition?" And he said he wants to manage a factory. And I sat down and I said, right, that's what we're going to get you to. And as we sort of went through, and I was guiding him along the way to push him into areas, own content, own processes, and I think what happened and what transpired through the process was, after 3 years, he was given the opportunity to run one of the biggest factories in Gauteng. And he still is there today, gone on to be quite successful in that role. And it was really not just so much around what I was giving him, it was more about, how he took that and made it his own and showed up differently. Just constantly pushing him, saying, I can't do that, but just give it a go. I'm here to back you up. As I said earlier, just give that person to see them the way that the opportunity for them to see you the way that, for the opportunity for them to see themselves the way that you see them. And I know we're short on time. I do have a second example, but it's the gist of it. I've seen people progress quite quickly through the ranks, just by giving them that opportunity to see themselves the way that I do.
And Brendan, looking back over your leadership journey and maybe your learning journey, who are the kind of role models of leadership that you would recommend future leaders should study?
That's a good question. I've got a few that come to mind. I think one particularly for me was Richard Branson. I know that he gets mentioned and referenced a lot, but what I loved about him was his early years as he was building out Virgin, and that experimentation, that risk taking. So there's that one. The second one, which I found really had a big influence on me, was Seth Godin. His philosophy around leadership, his philosophy around life is really, really amazing. And then there's one individual who's actually was a leader in my space that I think is actually two, I would say. One is an old boss of mine, a gentleman by the name of Kerry Watts. He for me was the epitome of what a great leader looks like. And then the second person that I just want to mention, who's had quite a significant impact on the way I see leaders today, is our CEO, Henrik Ekelund, who's had started this business, BTS, and has just grown it. And in my engagement with him, I've just learned sort of what a truly hands-on leader is all about. I've learned so much from him as an individual. So I think if one were to look at sort of thought leadership around, Richard Branson, definitely go and read one or two, if not all of his books. Look at Seth Godin. He's also got a couple of key ones for me that really stood out was the Icarus Deception. And then, Kerry Watts followed. Well, he's not that active on social media, but an amazing leader. And then also Henrik Ekelund, as I mentioned. So those would be my sort of go-tos.
And Brendan, how can our listeners connect with you, and where should they follow you?
I think the best bet is on LinkedIn. That's the easiest way. Available and most active on LinkedIn. I think that's the easiest way, yeah.
And last but not least, Brendan, what is your message to the millions of kids out there who are now finishing school, who are looking to enter the world of work, to start a career? What are maybe one or two success factors that they need to keep in mind?
I think number one is firstly, challenge the status quo. Have that critical mindset. And number two, this is it's going to sound cliched, but rather choose the path less taken than trod the path that has been taken. Make your own path. I think those two things for me are really critical if we want to see a complete shift in leadership and in the world.
Well, Brendan, thank you so much for taking the time to share your insights and your wisdom into the future of leadership and relating so many profound lessons on LinkedIn.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity to share this with you. I really do appreciate it, and I look forward to the Future Leader Forum. I look forward to the events, and I look forward to the insights you're going to be writing about. I would love to hear from some of my colleagues that have been interviewed from you as well.
Thank you.